Hi guys, Tuku here with a new video, and this video I want to discuss about the state of Soul Shuffle, so state of PvP in Season 2, 10.1.5. We have a week of the new patch, pretty much, and there is a lot of changes meta-wise. We did make a tier list video yesterday, but I wanted to discuss a bit more in depth about the current state of the classes, specs, and how it is MMR wise, because there is a lot of changes. There were a lot of changes towards healers, and I think a lot about the MMR system as well, for the good, for the game, for sure. I do feel that the queues are popping way faster than before 10.1.5, especially for DPS, so that's a good thing. And I'm actually looking forward to how it will shape up. Now, there is no surprise. We're going to show you the graphics, but pretty much Boomies and Shadow Priests from the ranged classes in US, but also in EU, pretty much are dominating the brackets. I think it is no surprise. I think it is currently a meta where balanced druid are really thriving. I made a tier list about how I see the meta and how it is, and we are going to look into the future probably this week or next week. Some nerfs towards the top end of the ladder and probably some buffs from the lower end. I'm looking at outlaw rogues being very dramatically undervalued, and assassination rogues too. They do need a rework, and there is a rework coming up for those three classes, specs: sub, assassination, and outlaw. Now, when it will be live, I do not know. I think 10.1.7 will be the rework for rogues, but I would not hold my breath and probably wait till 10.2 to get that rework. But for now, assassination rogue feels super bad to play, and I would really not recommend to play assassination rogue. The same for outlaw rogue. But if you want to get like that, like rank 1 title, I think those two specs are probably the better ones to actually get at. But it's very frustrating to play assassination rogues because, again, there is a lot of things that actually remove your death mark and remove your burst, and you are very dependent of your teammates. And auto rogue just doesn't have the damage and throughput to feel like you're doing anything. Now, a lot of people were kind of sad that I've put BM Hunter a bit higher on the tier list, on A tier. I do understand that it is high, for sure. I think I didn't stress enough that I felt like the BM Hunter and MM Hunter are more closely to the B tier than the top end of the A tier. It could be a A- or a B+, but I wanted to put it in A tier because I wanted to give some separation between A and B. But I do feel like they can win games. Now, the damage of a BM Hunter is very subpar. I did test it, and yes, the damage is really low compared to other specs, and the CC is just not sticking too much. Unfortunately, there's a lot of AoE in the game, and doing a freezing trap is not a guaranteed thing. Yes, you can play like the Diamond Eyes PvP talent, it will make it easier for you, but it feels like sometimes you're wasting a PvP talent, but that's pretty much how I feel. MM Hunter is pretty much on the same level, and people were saying like MM Hunter is much better than BM, and I felt like it is simply not true. I think the statistics are showing the 6 players less than BM. It's not like dramatic compared to like 79 from a balanced druid. Again, popularity and played specs are not like 100% thing on the ladder. It's not because you play a lot of Arms Warrior that it is an S+ spec. It just happens that Warrior is a very popular spec. It has nothing to do with how good it is or how bad it is, because players are just hovering around Warrior all the time. The same for Feral Druids. You have like a specific main, I would say, category of players that are playing only Feral Druids, and those Feral Druids are going to stick through thick and thin. And for example, Demon Hunters, Havoc Demon Hunters, you don't have a lot of diehard mains, and those diehard mains just hop on different specs or different classes to play the flavor of the month. And yes, you have some one tricks, but that is very, very, very rare for DH compared to other specs. Then you have like Frost Decay being really underperforming compared to Unholy Decays, so there is no reason to play Frost Decay, for example, and there is also no reason to actually climb with it because it's also actually very hard as well. And now I want to talk about the healers. Before the 10.1.5 patch, you had like a drought of healers around 2.4k. It was really rare to see like 1 or 2 healers at that bracket to be as high as that. Right now we have 103 healers, which is actually starting to shape up towards the better, I would say, statistics that you want for a healer. But what you really want is actually 33% healer and then 66% melees and ranged. But for now we have like 715 DPSs for only 103 healers, which is still statistically not good. It should be 33% because you have like always a healer in your groups, so you should have a higher amount healers in 10.4 to 2.4k, at least statistically. Of course, in practice it's a lot different because you're not facing 2.4k healers whenever you're 2.4k DPSs. Sometimes they're lower, sometimes they're higher, but you do see that there is a lot of holy paladins still. And I want to remind you guys that you see a lot of mistweavers, but those mistweavers were already like climbing. And I'm again going to say that mistweavers is probably one of the best healers in the game, but it is overshadowed by holy paladins. If you're like facing a holy paladin as a mistweaver, it becomes very hard to actually win those games. And that's mostly why I rate them a bit lower on the tier list compared to the other healers. And I feel like disparity is pretty big, but it is also because Holy Paladin is very fun. There is like no real statistics because it is just a fact. You have only one 2-point node on the spec tree, which is insane. It's actually very good because it means that you have a lot of choices to make, and you can make those choices depending on the situations, and just you have pretty much playstyle altering things that you can actually decide for yourself. And for the other healers, on average, you have 8 talents that have 2-point nodes or more. And for now, or more is not really the case because they have reduced those 3-point noders, but now it's gone. Now you have only 2-pointers. But the problem is you have like on average 8 of them on your spec tree. And that should be reduced. That should be reduced for a lot of specs. Like for example, BM Hunter actually suffers a lot for that. And BM Hunter actually suffers from, for example, the lack of the diversity of talents. I think that's made the main problem. Whenever it's getting nerfed, whenever it has like a little faint moment, I would say, they have nothing they can actually recover for. And that is the biggest issue for BM Hunter. So I hope they do fix that. But that's for EU. You see a lot of windwalkers these days. Windwalker is very strong. Do not sleep on that. It is actually very strong. Unholy Decay is very strong, and it is partly because of the meta. You see a lot of classes, and if you're facing a lot of classes, Unholy Decay is one of those melees that actually are faring correctly. They have ranged spells, so they cannot be kited too much. They have grips, they have slows, which are like 70%, which is big, and they can AoE slow pretty much. They have pets, they have AMS, AMZ, you have also short AMS, like even shorter AMS that you can put on an ally, for example. So you have a lot of ways to make it work, and that's why it's as high. Like imagine a meta where Enhancement Shaman, Fury Warrior, Arms Warrior, even Retribution Paladin, Feral Druids, if those were higher on the tier list, I would assume Unholy Decay will be lower. That is my take. But right now you have a lot of classes, and you see Augmentation Evokers actually overtaking Devastation Evoker. Again, my argument on the tier list, feeling that Augmentation is they even overtook Preservation, but so it's a more complete class spec than Preservation and Devastation. And I would say Preservation is much more complete than Devastation. Devastation is really left in the dust, and I do not know what they can do about it. I guess a rework is on on the crisp of things that they have to do on Devastation. I think I said it already on Twitter, or I think on Reddit, but I do think that Dragonflight is pretty much like a beta for the next expansion. There's a lot of things that they have to change, probably rework on the specs and on the classes. They had no time to do that. And I feel like this is pretty much the beta on how they want it to be in the future. Now, the issue is we have to wait a long time for that. I think pretty much 1 year from now to get a new expansion. And hopefully they change things, a lot of things, so for example PvP, but also just the specs, the classes, and how they feel, and how they actually give the options to putting points into those nodes. Again, I do understand why they want to have 2-point nodes and 3-point nodes, but often those nodes are very boring, and it's like there is no option to only play with 1 point out of those 2 nodes. 2-point noders, because like 1 point is just not enough to have impact on a talent, so it's a lost talent. You have to commit all those points into that node to actually make it work. Like for example, BM Hunter, there is a 3-point noder that you have to take if you're doing PvP to get Bestial Wrath, and it is pretty much like a crit thing that you got from Shadowlands and from previous expansions where it was just a passive crit whenever you're going to use Barbed Shot. And that's something they could easily make it a 1-point noder, even nerf it a bit, I don't care, but at least make it a 1-pointer, and then you have more choices. But right now, that's not the case. So you have a lot of those things on every single spec. But overall, I want to say that the PvP does feel better in 10.1.5, even though you have like broken specs, like for example, Balance Druid. Arguably, you can say that Holy Paladin is a broken spec. I'm not crying about it because I think it is needed in this current meta to have healers that are quite broken. I would like to see all the healers actually at the same level as Holy Paladin, but don't get it twisted. There is no meta where all healers are as viable to each other. That's not possible. It will always be rock, paper, scissors kind of gameplay because it is just how it is with metas. And if this priest is as good as a Holy Paladin, you will see a lot less resto druids, because resto druids just get randomly destroyed by disc priests. And also the same for holy priests. Those two have these spells, makes it a lot difficult to actually maintain hots. And as a resto druid, if you cannot maintain hots, you get destroyed. So you have things that are going to be obvious, like whenever resto shamans are very strong, you will see a lot less causes because the wind shear is very strong, the grounding totem is very strong. You have a lot of things that are going to be strong towards the other specs. So there is no status quo that is going to happen if everyone is OP, but you will have a fighting chance, you will have some good matchups and bad matchups, but at least they will feel correct to play and very good to play. And I do think that's one good thing about Holy Paladin. It is a very correct spec and class to play. And I want to show you guys in EU as well. Again, it's 2.4k. I'm not saying that I'm 2.4k right now because I have to grind a lot to get it. But you see that in EU, you have a lot more resto druids. Now, the thing is about the resto druid is that it can be very strong versus holy paladins because they have cyclone, and because it can actually be casted while someone is in bob, but they lack the things that actually can like close out games. And if you get interrupted on a cyclone, it's even worse than, let's say, if you're interrupting a tears deliverance from Holy Paladin, because they have like reduced interrupt like time on their auras, while resto druids do not have that. So there is that. You will see again a humongous amount of casters in EU. That's just how it is. If you're playing a warrior, you're going to face probably 2 casters in your lobby. That is how it feels, and that is actually the reality of things. You will see a bit more rogues in EU, because in EU we are loving rogues, and we do see a lot more mages as well. But the good thing and the good part is that meta actually resembles to the NA one. So it means that there is something that is going to be cooking up by Blizzard by that point. You do see a lot of Holy Priest again. I think Holy Priest is very strong. A lot of people are sleeping on it. I do think that they are very matchup dependent, and that's why sometimes it feels inconsistent. But I think Holy Priest has the tools to actually be able to fight a Holy Paladin. That's one of those specs that can actually like dispel Bob, Master Spell, They can do some damage, although it's very hard in social fall with dampening. You do not really want to be set back, but you have ways to actually be competing. And I do feel like I am quite accurate with my tier list. So if you want to check my tier list and you didn't do that, please do. Again, I think we can debate about hunters, how they feel. I think we can debate about Devastation Evoker a lot. I think Devastation Evoker is really close to be the worst spec with Outlaw Rogue. And we can debate about Arms and Fury. I think, like I said on the tier list, Fury being A and Arms being B tier is very, very accurate. I think Arms suffers a lot on the damage department, while Fury does suffer in the utility one. Had no access for War Banner does make it feel like if you get a CC at the wrong time, it is quite over. But Fury Warrior just fares a lot better versus the classes that you see on your screen. Overall, I'm quite happy about seeing more healers in 2.1k, 2.4k, but you can also see in 2.1k, I think it's more realistic for everyone. You see that healers finally do have a resurgence. So if you want to talk about statistics, I already did that, but you see 4,400 pretty much like more or less melees and DPSs, I mean, and you see 1.4k healers. And if you're like, again, you don't need to do too much math, but if you're dividing 1.4k with the 4.4k, you will see the statistics that should be 31%, 32%. That's actually super good for how it should be shaped up at higher levels. So it is actually fixing themselves. I think the MMR for healers is becoming better and better. It feels a lot better to actually climb as a healer. I think it also is a result, and it will be felt by queue times. I think the queue times are a lot lower, in my opinion, than before 10.1.5. It is because players are coming back to the game, or are healers coming back to the game. Did the boxes help, like those 50 conquest boxes? I think it kind of helped, but also the conquest boxes, the random conquest boxes that you can buy for your alts, that will come this week. Wednesday, I think, and you will be able to gear up a DPS if you want to via healer. I think that will also help a lot with the queue times, but also for yourself if you want to like gear up a DPS that you haven't geared up yet. It is the ideal thing to use and to do to get that DPS geared. So that's pretty much the state of PvP. I think as a whole, casters are supreme. That's for sure. You see that there is a lot more casters than melees, and that's something that usually doesn't really happen. If it's a melee meta, you will see a lot less ranged DPS compared to melees. But right now you do see a lot more ranged. Flavor of the Month Balanced Druid is very high on the list. It will eat a nerf. I think it will be very harsh for you guys, so be prepared to actually jump out the class if you do not main Balanced Druid, because that is inevitable. I think it will be happening. And we will see. You also see a lot of Retribution Paladin, but I think it is because of the popularity of Paladin. I don't think it's like a power-related thing. They can fare good versus a caster depending on your teammate, but it is very dependent on your teammate to make it work. If you're playing, like, let's say, with a Fury Warrior, for example, it is a meta comp, but it doesn't do well versus casters at the moment because the damage is just not sticking. So I think you want another caster, for example, Demonology Warlock, and you'll be doing fine, for example. Anyways, this is pretty much the tier list. Not tier list, but the discussion about Soul Shuffle and how it is currently, like, state-wise. I think we're going to do a 2s 2 and a 3s 1 and an RBG 1. I think RBGs are actually on the rise. I look forward for Blizzard actually giving out something to BG players. Hopefully we do get something. I love arenas, I love Soul Shuffle, but I think the future of PvP should come from BGs. Although it's less skilled, I think there is other things that are actually more skilled. For example, tactics, for example, the warfare that can bring a RPG, but also just in general, I think more new players can come in RPGs or in BGs and feel more welcome, I would say, and more satisfied with their gameplay. Of course, the reality is a bit different because you have to form those groups, and if you're bad, you're getting kicked or you're like the group is falling apart. But that's something that we should work on as a community, and also a Blizzard for us to give some tools to fight against that. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and we will catch each other very soon in the next video. Have a great day.